Welcome back to another episode of Futures in Fundraising. I'm David King, president of Alexander Haas, your host for Futures in Fundraising. Today we have with us Greg Warner. Greg is the CEO of MarketSmart and also the author of Engagement Fundraising. We're going to talk to Greg some today about the book and also about his company, which has a software and services solution to help organizations be more effective and more efficient with major gift fundraising and I guess fundraising in general, but really focused on major gifts. Welcome, Greg, and thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
I wanted to talk to you about the book a little bit to get us started, because I think that the book is it really sums up pretty well your philosophy and your thoughts on fundraising. And one of the major themes that I picked up as I read through it was trying to get your clients, or really trying to get everybody who picks up the book, to move away from transactional relationships with donors and move more toward creating donor engagement with the organization. So tell us a little about that. And I think there's an interesting story that I'd like you to tell about about how you got here, about the situation that made you want to move in this direction.
Okay, so I'll answer the first question first. Look, donors are pissed off. They don't know it, but they're pissed off. Okay, they want to give, and they want to volunteer, and they want to realize the best versions of themselves, which happens through philanthropy, whether it's major gifts or even just a major gift in their mind. You know, I mean, it could be $100, and they think that's a big deal, and that's fine. But they don't get much back from the charitable sector, except asked to give more gifts. Okay, so that's crappy. That's really crappy. And in fact, it's interesting. On my podcast, I have three of them, but on one of them, we interviewed Penelope Burke recently, and she did some surveys finding that last year donors, although we had a record year in the charitable sector, donors tremendously undergave. So why is that? It's because they're not gaining enough value out of the giving. It's too transactional and it's too one way. So they don't give more. And that means the charitable sector is leaving massive amounts of money on the table, all because they ask, and someone made up this thing that the number one reason that people don't give is because they weren't asked, which is a load of horse shit. Oh, can I curse? Sorry.
We can bleep that.
Okay. So I have a habit. So the treating donors well and letting them experience value and giving back to donors is actually a core component to gaining more gifts. It's the law of reciprocity, and people end up giving much, much more when they're treated well and when the organization gives back to them. So now this goes back to my story, is that I'm really just a pissed off donor who was running a marketing company. And I was helping sell roofing, home improvements, satellites for big satellite companies, a big Fortune 500 company called Hughes here in the Maryland, D.C. area, defense contractors. I mean, you name it, we would hustle it. I mean, we were a typical ad agency, marketing agency, and our sole, the way we worked was mostly in lead generation to find highly qualified leads for highly considered sales. So these are like major gifts and legacy gifts. These are big transactions, and you need a consultative selling approach. But you also have to have a value-oriented customer mentality in order to help customers move themselves through the consideration process, which could be 18 months, could be several years. So we were really good at generating highly qualified leads for the sales teams, especially the whiny suckers who would always say that they don't have any good leads. So we would just qualify and qualify and qualify and tee them up until the owner of the company, the CEO, which was the person I was usually dealing with, would look at him and be like, "This is so qualified. You can't say it's not qualified. Just go there
It's closing
and close
itself.
the sale." Yeah, it's like everybody. I don't know if you ever saw Glengarry Glen Ross, the old movie, before like Alec Baldwin started punching people in the face in New York, getting arrested and everything. When he was young, he was in that movie. It was amazing. He was amazing in that movie, and it was about salespeople. And he said this thing, always be closing, right? And that's like the fundraising sector says, always be asking, always be asking. This is not true. But he drove his staff to become criminals, literally, because they felt that pressure to just get the sale. And they always looked at the other leads that someone else got, and they said, I want those leads. I want the Glengarry leads.
Right.
That's what they always wanted. So anyway, where did I meander? I went all over the place. You asked me something. There you go. You said I was supposed to talk a lot.
Yeah. So I had asked about, your own, you sort of got to this pissed off donor thing by being one yourself is one of the things I picked out in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Yeah, I mean, I'm still pissed off. I was just talking to one of my staff who just left here, my product manager, and I was telling her how I gave to a certain charity, and just, I mean, the ruthless amount of pestering that I got and still get now that it's been 4 months since I gave. I think I've gotten 5 asks. Well, it's really 10 if you count both the direct mail and the email.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, can you just tell me what you did with my money? Maybe once.
So one of the things that we talk a lot to our clients about, and we're in the major gift space largely too, is the difference between doing good development work, which we think is about strengthening relationships, and not the relationship between the development officer and the donor, but the relationship between the donor and the organization that they're supporting, but strengthening that relationship. The difference between that, strengthening relationships, and fundraising, because, asking for money, there is a point in the development process where asking for money is appropriate, but it is one point in the process. It is not the entire process. So we're always talking to our clients about, if you're doing good development work, you actually might not have to ask for money because the relationship will be there and the donor's already bought in. And it struck me that how we talk about that difference between development and fundraising, which a lot of people in the sector think is just semantics, but to us it's not. It's a real difference. That is similar to the concept you talk about in your book about sort of changing the way development officers think about their work and maybe the way their bosses think about their work, that they're facilitators. So that seems to me, talk about that a little bit. It seems to me like we're saying the same thing in different words a little bit.
Yeah, actually, it might be the exact same words. It's fine. I've talked a lot about the fact that fundraisers are facilitators. Look, if you go up to any salesperson, first of all, any fundraiser will look at you if you say, like, look, I'm going to send you a salesperson. They'll be like, ooh, salesperson, right? Well, if you tell any salesperson that you're going to send a fundraiser to go see them, they're going to be like, ugh. Okay. So nobody likes fundraisers and nobody likes salespeople. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Or I shouldn't say nobody. You know me. I'm being egregious here. But I mean, people, of course, once you develop relationship, you like them, right? But generally, that's not the first. When you go into your shopping, you're looking at a car. You're in a car dealership. Someone comes over to you. They say, "Can I help you? Do you have any questions?" No, I'm just looking. Right? So what's the problem here? The real problem with the thing that people have to understand is that relationships develop over time. And the cornerstone, the foundational element of all relationships, whether it's with a fundraiser, the organization, whatever, a salesperson, their company, my company, your company, the foundational element, the cornerstone that nothing can happen unless that's in place is trust.
Right.
Now, trust is built very slowly,
and destroyed very quickly.
And destroyed, it can be destroyed instantly.
Yeah.
And then it may never build back up, once it's destroyed. So what does this have to do with really fundraising? Is recognizing that trust is the cornerstone, and everything you do has to supplement that and build upon that trust. So, like I was just telling you, I gave one gift. Next thing you know, I'm getting hit on 5 times. Right. I didn't say because I gave one gift that I gave you permission to pelt me. I didn't say you could pummel me. I said I was beginning a relationship, and then what did you do? You jumped all over me. It's not fair. So what happens? My trust. And then here's what happens also is interesting, seemingly similar organizations. All of a sudden, I'm getting all kinds of mail and email from all kinds of organizations that I never gave to.
Right.
Well, I didn't give them my information. I didn't give them my email. Yet now all of a sudden I'm getting lots of requests. Well, how do you think that I know how that happened. Right. They sold my damn name for like a penny. A friggin' penny. They sold my name. Is that going to bolster my trust in them? That they're so dumb and not nice that they gave my name away to a competitor.
Right.
And I wanted to give to them that charity. I don't want those other organizations to win. Unbelievable. So we're talking about trust. And now here, to answer your other question, though, about facilitation. So my staff and me, I've been in sales since I was a kid. I never ask for the order. You don't have to. 99.9% of sales is doing everything else right.
Right.
If you do that right, and you've built that trust and answered all their questions and helped them realize that they can win if they ask for the contract, then you never have to ask for the contract or the gift. People always step forward, and our experience, they always come forward and they say, okay, what's next? Or you can ask them, what do you want to do next? That's fine. But they will usually say, what's next? Well, it seems like you're probably ready for a contract. And they're like, yeah, send me that. You see, they self-solicit and they just want direction. They just want help. If I early on in the process, or even sometimes too late, if I jumped on them and said, okay, can I send you a contract? Yep. Is that going to work? It's not going to work.
Yeah. So that's what we talk, to our development officers we work with is your job really is to find out what the donor is really interested in, and then expose them to things that you're doing that match that interest. And if you do that well, they will say, okay, how do I help you do that? They've, like you said, they've self-solicited because you showed them where you have a common interest and common goals.
Yeah, well, and there's one really important step, really important step that you, I'm sure, know, but many in the sector and even in sales miss. Okay, and this is like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Neil Rackham and spin selling from like 35 years ago, where he traveled around and he went on 35,000 sales calls to figure out what makes the best salespeople really win, mm-hmm. and crush it, right? And what he found was, he calls it the need payoff stage. I call it the affirmation stage. So this is once you find the fit, and you connect those dots and you help them connect those dots, you need to encourage and help the donor or the customer, help them say on their own why it's a good idea for them to do what they're thinking about doing. They need to create these affirmations. They need to talk to themselves, or sometimes talk to their wife, their spouse. If it's a customer, they have to talk to their team, their boss, others. They have to practice that, and then they have to have their conscious mind talk to their subconscious mind so that it really gets in deep, that interest turns into desire, mm-hmm. and only then can they turn it into action. So that important step is a finesse step that most salespeople, most fundraisers really don't concentrate on. This simple there's simple questions that you can outline and think about and ask people so that they think about it in that way and they start talking to themselves. It's like, well, even one is like, well, if you were to go ahead with this, like what color would you imagine that your name would be on the building? How would you like that to be? Well, I'd really like it to be gold. And, I'm just making that up all of it, but you got to
get them to envision the end.
Yeah. And those affirmations and talk to themselves. And so why would you want it to be gold? Well, because I want it to really shine, or because because the school is the red and the gold, and it should be gold. I don't know, but they'll start telling you the reasons why. They'll create these affirmations. This is what Rackham calls the need payoff stage. Is they have needs, they have to talk about the payoff, the real deep reason why they want to do it. And once you get them doing that, and it's not manipulative, you're helping them.
Right.
You're helping them sell themselves. Then they get excited, because that's, again, where interest turns into desire and then can finally be converted into action, mostly from the donor. They will, what I call self-solicit.
Yeah.
They will tell you, okay, I'm ready to go.
Yep. Great. Having a great conversation with Greg Warner, CEO of MarketSmart. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back with more from Greg.
I actually love talking to the people that I get to speak with on a daily basis. So with our clients, as a campaign strategy study coordinator, I make the calls to set up the interviews for the campaign strategy study. A campaign strategy study is when one of our clients is wanting to conduct a campaign. We do a study to help them determine not only the feasibility of the campaign, but also what the strategies of that campaign should be. So I speak with some of the coolest people on a day-to-day basis. I'm calling people all over the nation, all over the world sometimes. We get interviewees for clients in other countries, and it's really fascinating to talk to these people.
We're back on Futures in Fundraising. I'm David King, your host. Today we have Greg Warner, CEO of MarketSmart. We've been talking about his book, Engagement Fundraising, and some of the philosophies that he and his firm have. We were talking about building trust, Greg, and that takes time. So I want to ask you about something that's happening in the nonprofit sector that I think is a detriment to building trust, and that is this turnover rate with development officers. I saw something, you mentioned some research by Penny. I think I read some other research Penny had done recently that said currently we're looking at a 16-month turnover rate on average for development officers. Let's talk a little bit about what that does to the process of engaging donors.
Yeah, I mean, nobody likes a revolving door. No customers want a revolving door. No, look, if you're going to go to McDonald's, you don't really care who's cooking your food, right?
Well, within reason.
Within reason, right. But if you're going to go, I don't know, let's suppose you're electrician. I don't know, so even your haircut, right? Where there's the electrician, of course, you don't want them to burn your house down. With a haircut, you go to the same person. Right. And then they all of a sudden say he or she's not here. You're like, I don't know if they'll do it right. It doesn't matter much for me because I don't have that much hair anymore. But, I don't really care. But most people, they kind of care. You become creatures of habit and you just trust someone with a sharp, shiny object near your face. So you want to make sure that they're consistent and they're there and you trust them. They're not going to shove it through your throat. So the fundraising turnover, the turnover of staff is just, is just not good. It's not good for trust. But I don't really blame the fundraisers.
Right.
Honestly, I blame leadership,
Yep.
and in some ways, I blame many donors and the media, because the media is always looking for a gotcha. They're always trying to find a charity that's doing something wrong.
Right.
That turns into this, like, leadership is always fearful that they'll do something wrong, so they want to make sure their costs are low, and then they don't pay the fundraisers enough.
Right.
And then the fundraise, and they don't invest in training. They don't invest in like just having a good work environment, which is fair. So any major donor should recognize that fundraisers should be paid well. They shouldn't be starving. They're not into charity as much as you are. It's not fair.
Yeah.
So they put all this pressure on them, and then they put a pressure on them to close gifts when they shouldn't be doing that. They should put pressure on them to build relationships and facilitate. So they only look at the end dollar amount, which is the wrong metric, frankly.
Right.
Because if you look at everything else, if you build your pipeline right, if they're highly qualified, if they're engaging because you're delivering, massive amounts of value, unbelievable amounts of value to them, the dollars will come. But if you pelt them and pummel them over and over and over and ask because somebody told you that that's the only reason they don't give, they're not going to keep, and then the fundraiser is going to leave because they didn't hit their numbers and they're being berated by their leadership. So this is just,
and somebody else offers them, a 15% raise when your maximum is 3%. You could do a fantastic job and we can get you a 3% raise, yippee.
Yeah. And you know what, though, here's the other thing interesting. As much as the raise is important, most people are not motivated by money, believe it or not.
Well, if they get into this sector, they're probably not, because there's much better ways to make money than working in a nonprofit, right?
Yeah. But there's tons of ways that you can help a fundraiser find meaning in their lives and feel fulfilled in their role. But the leadership doesn't understand that. I haven't found enough leaders that really care about their staff. Now, look, I'm going to brag, because if you go to my Glassdoor at glassdoor.com, you look up at MarketSmart at Maryland, I go ahead. I'm not afraid, because you'll see exactly the way I treat my staff. I go overboard to treat them well. I go overboard to overpay them. It's important. How can you possibly deliver value to customers? I can't deliver value to customers if my people are unhappy. So fundraisers, the same thing. Nonprofits, if they really want to make their donors happy, which I wonder about sometimes, I think they'd rather they just want the money. So, and that's not cool either. Like, if you're so short-sighted, you're like, we don't really care about the donors. We just want their money. Well, then you're all wrong anyway. So I blame the board. I blame the leadership. I blame the media. I don't really blame the poor fundraisers. And in fact, here's a plug. Sorry, you can edit this if you don't want it. But that's why I built part of my software is automates the cultivation process, because with this turnover rate, this way the donors are getting value from really highly valuable cultivation in an automated fashion that we know works. Even if the fundraiser leaves, it's still going on.
Right. So one of the things that always bothers me is how I think how boards and the media and just sort of everybody in general evaluates nonprofits so completely different than they evaluate for-profits when it comes to operational infrastructure. So I wish we could get rid of the word overhead in the sector completely and talk about infrastructure. And you'll see boards just lament over having to pay a qualified CEO or a qualified vice president for advancement or whatever the chief fundraising officer is. But then you pivot to the for-profit world, and the number one thing you have to have if you're going to be successful in growing a business is a qualified, good leader at the top who's compensated appropriate to that skill level. But when we get into the nonprofit world, we're trying to pinch pennies so hard that we essentially starve the sector of leadership.
This is true. Although it would be nice to see some amazing CEOs that have made their billions or millions just go ahead and work for free for a charity for $1. Build it. I don't understand why that doesn't happen. Just taking the contrarian perspective.
No.
I mean, I agree with you. It's just that I always wonder, like, look, if you're that good, why don't you take 5 years and fix an organization that's doing good? I mean, I don't see why, there isn't a recruitment of that. It's easy for me to say, here I am sitting here earning my money. I'm not doing that, but I do volunteer and I do give. And, I guess, what it is, the thing is the donors want someone to do it for them. They don't want to actually roll up their sleeves and get in there and run it. It's a hard job. Also, is running a nonprofit is very different than running a company. Like, this is my company. Nobody can tell me much what to do. I'm God, right? So, I mean, I'm subservient to the customers and the market forces and everything. But when you work at a nonprofit, wow, then you're dealing with, you got the donors, you got the programs, you got the beneficiaries of the programs, you got the media, you got the board, you got the IRS. I mean, it's too many. It's massively more complex. I'm terrified of it.
I want to ask you something, shifting back a little bit to the book. One of the pieces of advice that you gave in this book, which I think is fantastic, and I actually think you should print stickers that every nonprofit professional in the world sticks on whatever they look at all the time. And that was this concept of treating every donor as an individual. Because I think sometimes in an effort to be fast and efficient and, effective or whatever, we just start lumping everybody together. And like all the emails you got from this organization, you gave one gift and you get all these emails. I think we forget that, we tag somebody as a major donor and then we're going to treat everybody in that bucket the same. Well, they're not all the same. And it's not even related to how much money they can give. It's how they think, there's just so many differences. So that concept, I think, is fabulous. How do you go about turning that on in your clients, getting them to flip that switch and go, oh yeah, Bob and Nancy are different, even though they demographically look identical?
Yeah, one. Number two is that you have to realize that you can leverage technology to deal with the fact that these personas and segmentation is a load of.
Hey, Greg, we lost you there for a second. Sorry.
Sure. I'm going to start at the top with.
Yeah, do. All right, we're back live.
Things.
So answer that again.
Okay, so there are really two things that you need to consider with this. That number one, this whole thing about persona segmentation. The other thing is that you can leverage technology to build on, to deliver highly personalized, hyper-relevant messages to individuals. Now, let me get to the first thing first about the target market, segmentation, all this, So I don't know, it's like 10, 15 years ago, there's all this big data kind of starting. And these data companies creating, they're like the soccer moms, and then you got the motivated movers and I don't know what kind of, all this nonsense about all this segmentation. And then that leads people to believe that, well, we can segment our donors, that, well, we got the major donors, we got the planned gift donors. It's like, really, that's funny because I thought planned gift donor was a major donor. Right. How do you decide, by the way, that they're a planned gift donor? You can't decide that for them. Only they can decide that. So all this pre-qualifying without talking to the donor is just, it doesn't work. Now, here's a real world case in point. Don't take my word for it. Look at Netflix, right? Read at segmentation and all that stuff too. But now when you get onto your Netflix, if you have Netflix, I'm assuming you do, everybody does, maybe you don't, percent customized to you. And it adjusts. Same with your Amazon account. It's just 100%. And that's all just technology. So they recommend movies for you. They recommend shows. Same with Amazon. They recommend, a book I've looked at or bought in the past. This is true one-to-one. This is the future, and it's now. This is, again, sorry, I'm plugging the heck out of my company, but this is what we do. Listen to people and then talk to them on a one-to-one basis. And it's not expensive. It just takes a little bit of thought. And first, you just have to actually care about them enough to want to deliver that kind of relevance. You also have to recognize that it doesn't necessarily need to be for all 400,000 donors. Okay. Not everybody wants that kind of relationship. Many people only want a arm's length relationship at the very beginning as they build trust. It would be nice if it's one-to-one, but especially if you're going to do it anywhere, especially focus on the top 10 or 20% of your donor base, the ones who are giving the most. Start there. It might only be 50 people. It could be 450, but you got to give each of them the exact one-to-one personalized experience, because that's where the massive, you double your revenue with those 450 people if you just gave them a little bit better experience and didn't treat them like they're in a bucket.
So you mentioned the Netflix thing. I had to create, we started out with, we have Netflix and I had an account and everybody sort of logged in and we just had one. And we ended up having to create a profile for everybody in the family because I got tired of turning it on and my teenage daughter had been watching it before. And all of a sudden it tells me, oh, if you like Grey's Anatomy, you might like whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't like Grey's Anatomy, so I'm not going to like whatever. So we had to separate out the profiles because and then my teenage son, if you like death and violence, you'll like more death and violence. So
yeah.
You do have to make sure that you're targeting the right person in the group when you let the technology take over.
Without a doubt. I mean, look, this gets complicated. It's not easy, and most charities can't do it, so they got to outsource it. But that's fine. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. That does it for us today on Futures in Fundraising. I think
there might be a delay.
Oh. Yeah, we got a little bit. Well, Greg, I want to thank you for joining us today on Futures in Fundraising. It's been great. Again, the book is Engagement Fundraising. The company is MarketSmart. I don't mind plugging it. Thanks a lot. We enjoyed having you. Great conversation. You're clearly passionate about what you do and passionate about the sector. And that's the kind of guests we like to have on Futures in Fundraising. So I hope everyone out there will join us for our next episode of Futures in Fundraising.